what has really surprised me, because I've known Rachel for many, many years, known and respected and admired Rachel for so many years. But now that we're working so closely together, what surprised me is how aligned we are in our thinking all the time, and how alike we are in so many ways. In fact, we often show up to events in coordinated outfits. We've never talked to each other about it.
Spooky.
But we look good together too.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's actually a super fun thing to have discovered.
Welcome. This is Uncommon Sense, a CPA podcast presented by the Heshi CPA Knowledge Center. The center is an initiative of the CPA Education Foundation, the charitable arm of the Chartered Professional Accountant profession in Alberta. For the record, this CPA podcast isn't about bean counting. Our episodes feature conversations with Alberta CPAs sharing their insights on a wide range of timely topics. I'm Gordon Turtle, your host for this episode, and we have two guests today, Ruth McHugh FCPA, FCMA, MBA, and Chair of CPA Alberta, and also Rachel Miller, FCPA, FCA, and Chief Executive Officer of CPA Alberta. Over the course of her career, Ruth has held several leadership positions in the public and private sectors. As well, she has served on multiple boards in both director and chair roles. She was instrumental in leading the accounting profession through its unification process back in the 2010s, and is currently in her second year as chair of CPA Alberta. Her blend of C-suite and board experience has given her unique perspectives on how boards and leadership teams can come together to achieve goals. Rachel Miller has a long history of national leadership in the CPA world. Like Ruth, she played a critical role in the creation of the CPA profession and has led CPA Alberta since its inception in 2015. Prior to working with CPA Alberta and its predecessor organizations, Rachel worked in a variety of roles at local and national accounting firms. She has a passion for the profession and in developing future leaders. These two high-achieving women are here today to talk about women in leadership, discuss how to build effective boards, and exchange thoughts on how boards and corporate leadership teams can best work together to achieve success. Thank you both for being here today.
Well, thank you for having us. We're excited for the conversation.
Nice to see you, Ruth.
Yeah, and it should be fun. And I do want to say this could be about bean counting because I really enjoy it. I sometimes do bookkeeping and read standards for fun. So,
well, if we do an episode on bean counting, I'll be sure to give you a call.
Awesome. I'm there.
You both have extensive experience as leaders in various organizations. Based on your experiences, what would each of you say are the 2 or 3 keys to being a successful leader? Let's start with you, Ruth.
Oh, okay, Gord. Well, when we think about leadership, we think also about power. And as we know, there are many different kinds of power, like structural power. If I lead an organization and I've got an executive team reporting to me and they've got teams reporting to them, with the stroke of a pen, I can create a direction that they're compelled to follow. And I've been in some really interesting leadership situations, usually when I'm dealing with an initiative that's pan-Canadian, and I have no structural power to make important decisions on my own. So I need to use the powers of collaboration and persuasion and influence and shared purpose and common interest to create the conditions under which the right decisions will be made. And to me, that's inspirational leadership. And inspirational leadership propels people to follow when they have the freedom not to. So I strive to be an inspirational leader even when I have structural power.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah, for sure. What about you, Rachel? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd actually build on that. Totally agree with what Ruth said, shockingly, as like she said in the beginning, we seem to be very aligned in a lot of things. And I think in order to do that, one of the most important things to do is really listen and have empathy and make sure that when you're talking to colleagues, when you're talking to your staff, when you're talking to your boards, and those who are looking to you for leadership, that you understand their perspectives, you know who you're talking to, you know where they've come from, and you listen, really truly listen to understand. You might not agree, but you really want to try to understand their perspective and then help them understand your perspective. And through both of those understandings, you'll probably end up with the right direction to lead forward. So,
such a good point. Absolutely true.
So what happens if they don't understand, even though you've made your best efforts to help them understand?
Well, that would be sort of one of the biggest challenges of being a leader, I think, is ultimately it's your decision and you have to say no. I do truly feel that people just want to be heard, though. They want to know that they've been listened to. And as long as you've truly listened, you've truly indicated that you understand where they're coming from, sometimes as a leader, you do have to move in a different direction. And you have to be very clear about why you've chosen that, acknowledge the input that others have had, but sometimes you do have a different picture. You're at a higher level. So sometimes it is a different direction you need to move in. And sometimes people aren't happy with that. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges you have as you're leading forward.
Yeah, for sure.
If I could just add to that, Rachel, I completely agree with you. And one of the things that I have found it helpful to remind people of when I'm in that situation. So let's say you've asked groups of people, so it's very simple, should we go right or should we go left? You've asked for their input. You've truly listened to their input. And some say go right and some say go left. And at the end of the day, as the leader, you take all of that good input and you think about the impact on all stakeholders and you make a decision to go left. It's really important to help people understand that because you said go right and we chose to go left doesn't mean we didn't hear you. It means that somebody was going to not have their way, on this, because you can't go both right and left. But to really help them understand that your input was helpful to our decisions, and it helped us to identify some risks of going left and some things that we'll need to be really careful on and potentially course correct as we go left. So your input was heard and valued. So totally agree with you, Rachel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also it's super important as a leader to not ask for input if you don't want input. So if you're asking for input, then you better be willing to listen and consider that input. And there are sometimes as a leader where you just have to make a decision, then you shouldn't ask for input on it, because really that's going to cause people not to trust you as you go forward, that you're actually not listening to what they're saying. So I think that's the other important. Know when to ask for input and know when you need to make a decision regardless of the input that you receive. Do you really want to ask for it?
Super good point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as the old saying goes, the only constant is change. That's certainly the case in organizations these days in all sectors, I think. So what's it like being a leader these days in 2024? What's changed in terms of leadership over the last few years? Who wants to start off on that one?
I could start.
Okay, Rachel.
I actually think it's really exciting. I think a changing environment is something I quite love. I'm more a changer than a maintainer, for sure. I think that the environment that we're in now has so many places where you can learn and grow and develop, and so many opportunities for those that you're leading to learn and grow and develop. I think it's just a super exciting place to be. Challenging, but also a ton of opportunities that you wouldn't have had in an environment that is not as dynamic.
Yeah, I so agree, and I think one of the really important changes that's happening, it's this groundswell of people are purpose-driven. So people care about what causes them to bring their time and talent to this organization versus any other organization out there. They care about a common purpose, and that's so exciting. So I completely agree with you. It's an exciting time to be a leader.
Well, one of the guests we've had on the podcast recently spoke about the importance of creating that sense of belonging for people. So a big factor in people choosing where to, start their careers or grow their careers is, can they establish that sense of belonging? And does the employer and do the leadership team help create that sense of belonging? And I think that's kind of what you both are speaking about as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the best thing about being a leader? Like, what's great about it? And what's the toughest part? You've kind of spoken about the tough part already, I guess, but what's the good part? Ruth?
I think being a leader gives you the opportunity to create that sense of purpose, that common interest, that shared vision. It gives you the opportunity to listen to all kinds of people's perspectives about what this organization is about and how can we best do what we're about. And I think being a leader, you have the privilege of creating the conditions where people can bring their best self to work every day. Let's face it, our work, it takes a lot of the hours of our lives, and it really does impact us. And leadership matters. If I'm happy at work and feel like I'm making a difference and that I'm making an impact, I can bring my best self to work and I can be my best self. So I think it's a real privilege to be a leader.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And I think speaking directly from a role as a CEO in a leadership position, the part that I really love about it is that you do get to build your team. You get to surround yourself with people who complement your skill sets, who can help you grow and develop, and you get to watch them grow and develop and really have an influence on their future careers as well. One of the things that I was surprised as coming into the CEO role was how much I really enjoyed that. Just talking to people, ensuring they had what they needed to be successful, watching them grow and develop and get better and better at their roles as well. So I think you don't get many opportunities to do that in other roles. And being a leader, you definitely get to see and shape sort of the future generation, really.
Totally true.
You probably heard, the theory or the principle that everyone in an organization is a leader in one way or another, even someone at, an entry-level position who's only been at the organization for 6 months or whatever. Do you think that's true? And is everyone a leader in one way or another in an organization?
I sure think so, Gordon. And the phrase that I've heard that I love that captures that is lead from where you stand. So every one of us is standing somewhere, and where I'm standing today or in this hour might be different from where I'm going to stand tomorrow or on a different issue, but I will lead from where I stand, and all of us can do that.
That sums it up in one short sentence for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about that structural or having power and having the right to power versus being able to influence and have that power from any position. And when I was speaking of leadership, I talked about being able to select my team because I am the CEO, so I do get to select the team that I work with. But you can lead from different parts of the organization and help others grow and develop all the way across the organization, regardless of what level you're at. So I think that's pretty exciting. And those leadership skills can be developed through the roles that you do, through the projects that you do, that really just even how you speak to your fellow staff members, getting someone a cup of coffee and starting a conversation is a type of leadership. So
what do you two think about, can people take courses in leadership, or can you go to school to learn leadership, or is it something you learn organically just through experience and mentoring and that kind of thing on the job? Any thoughts on that?
So my thought on that is both, because there are a lot of really good leadership programs, leadership courses out there. And I think with anything we do, the more informed we are. So to Rachel's earlier point about listening, to gather information and gather perspectives, information is power. So yes, formal knowledge in different leadership styles, different power styles. And for example, Deepak Chopra has said that who you are speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying. So as leaders, we have a big voice. We need to be really aware of that and really understand that. I don't think I would have known that had I not been educated to learn that phrase. So I think both, and of course, mentorship and on-the-job training is absolutely vital as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need to learn the foundational knowledge so that you recognize how to self-reflect, recognize different leadership styles, understand that different individuals work differently. And then you can also learn leadership skills by working with someone who has those skills. By really thinking about how do I make someone else's job easier is how you really can develop those leadership skills through working. But having some way of ensuring you're reflecting and you're thinking about and you're learning new ways to do things is important. So I think it is a combination of both.
Yes, and certain podcasts can really help you learn a lot about leadership as well.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Okay, well, we've dodged this question long enough, but Art, what's the toughest part about being a leader? Rachel, you spoke about having to make those tough decisions. Any other challenges in being a leader these days?
I think sometimes it can be lonely at the top. So sometimes having a peer group of other leaders that you're working together with is super helpful. So I've belonged to a number of different sort of groups of chairs. And also like the McKay CEO Forum, for example, I had belonged to that. And then there's a program called Just for Chairs that the Ozone Group has put together. And so it's really good to have others who are in your situation that you can, bounce ideas off and speak to as a thinking partner as you're struggling through certain things, because it can be lonely at the top.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about saying no, I think is the hardest part, because really that is your role as a leader. You know what resources your organization has, and you cannot do everything, which sort of leads to the other challenge in the dynamic environment that we live in. It is super exciting. It's also really challenging to stay focused on what your mission, your vision, your mandate is. There are so many things that you could do, so many exciting ways to make an impact and make a difference. Sometimes it's very challenging to make sure that you are always making every decision based on where you really need to go as an organization, and don't get too far off track that you're not achieving your core mandate because you're focused on other things that are happening around you. So I think that's been a challenge more, I would say, now than 10 years ago, with sort of that dynamic environment and the number of big, real issues that there are out there to deal with, making sure you stay focused and are able to actually make an impact and not just doing a ton of things with very little impact. Sometimes you have to do one thing with a lot of impact. And that's a bit challenging to navigate that road, I think.
So true.
So just on that concept of, sometimes it's lonely at the top. Someone once said, as a leader, you're never not the boss. So if you run into a team member at a hockey game or at the staff holiday party or something, you still got to be the boss. You still have to be the leader. You can't be a peer with them. I've heard arguments on both sides of that. So I don't know. Can you stop being the boss at times, or are you always the boss?
Well, I don't know, Gordon. If you see me dancing at our CPA convocation with a glass of champagne in my hand, I guess I'm still the boss, but I'm there to have fun and celebrate with our new CPAs. So,
do you think people treat you as just a guest at the party, or are you still the chair when they talk to you? What do you think?
I feel like we're all in this together for the same common purpose. So I don't feel like I'm being treated any differently. So I'm not sure though.
Yeah, and I would think it depends on where you are and what you're doing. I think you always are sort of representing the organization, and you can be friends with your peers and your staff outside of work as long as you're not talking, though, about work. And you also have to remember, though, whatever you're doing will reflect on you at the work environment. So it is tougher, I think. But I do have personal relationships with a lot of the people that I work with. And I have to be very careful, though, on what you have conversations about. So obviously, if you're friends with your coworkers or your direct reports and you have a bad day with one of them, you better not complain about it to the other one. So there are those things you have to be very careful of. And when you are out in public, those who know where you are working at or what organizations you're with, you do now more than ever reflect on those. So you still have to behave in a professional, respectful way. But I think you can balance it as long as you're looking at the situation and really ensuring that you're having the proper conversations with people.
I completely agree with you. Completely agree, Rachel. And I think that another quality of leadership is to be authentic and be genuine. So if who you are is a good person with good intentions and good leadership skills, that's going to come across wherever you are. You will conduct yourself with decorum because that's who you are.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. If you are a true, authentic leader and you are bringing your full self to work, there's less opportunities outside of work where you're going to break that trust because you are being true to yourself.
Well, there you two are agreeing again. For a minute there, I thought we were going to go in different directions, but you came together at the right time. So just changing gears slightly, what sorts of obstacles and challenges do women face to become leaders and succeed in those roles? Do you have any personal stories about confronting such obstacles as women in leadership? Rachel?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot. And And I'm glad to say that I think some of the things that I've experienced as a woman in leadership, the next generation will not experience. One of the things that I was actually asked at a panel discussion on women leadership is about imposter syndrome. So that is one thing that I do actually suffer from quite a bit. Every once in a while, I'm like, one day people are going to realize I'm just playing dress up. And some of the younger women in the audience were like, yeah, we totally don't suffer from that at all. We're super confident. We know what we're doing. And I think for me, it comes from growing up with less women leaders around, less people to look up to, less people who are doing the role that you're doing so that you know you're doing the right thing. Whereas I think nowadays there's lots of women in really great leadership positions. We can always use more. And so I think the younger generation will hopefully suffer less from that imposter syndrome and some of the things that we struggled with going through leadership ourselves. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. And when I think about it, I think that I personally didn't experience any barriers because I don't perceive barriers. I perceive super fun challenges. And the harder the race, the greater the medal at the end. So I think sometimes it's a way we perceive things because I so remember many times I'm the only woman in the boardroom. And I was in the boardroom at a pretty young age as well. So I'm not only the only woman in the boardroom, I'm one of the youngest people in the boardroom. So for sure, I've been asked to pour coffee a lot of times. I've been called a good little note taker. And I think, you know what, gentlemen, go ahead, underestimate me at your peril because I'm going to have so much fun when I whip out my briefcase and put everything on the table and we start this negotiation. So it's fun. It's a challenge. It's fun. But I also recognize that for some women, there are real barriers. And so I don't want anyone to think I'm being flippant about this, because I'm not. Because I do think that our society, our culture is such that little girls grow up nurturing in different ways than little boys do. Little girls communicate in different ways than little boys do. And women tend to take on the majority of the role in raising children. Even if both parents are working, there's a nurturing, a DNA level part of women where their mind is on their child. And so I think that there are still things that we need to catch up on from a biological perspective to match where we are in society. So the struggle is real.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think building on that with the family dynamics too, I think it was probably more challenging when we were coming up through the ranks as leaders, because there was less discussion in society about equal balance of household chores, of looking after the kids. I have to say I was super fortunate. I have an amazing husband. We're celebrating 30 years this year.
Wow, congratulations.
And I was actually reflecting on sort of the ups and downs we've had through those past 30 years. And when we had kids, he took on a lot more than most of his male colleagues did. And so I was very fortunate that way. But also I saw how sometimes it impacted him as well, in that his friends would be like, well, why are you doing that? Why isn't your wife doing that? And so I think that nowadays, both the male and the female are more used to, or both females or both males, more used to sharing those types of responsibilities. And so hopefully as we go up further in the years, it'll be an easier thing for people to work out how you deal with the work plus the family environment as well. And I know a lot of women do struggle with that, and that's one thing that I've been very fortunate to have Chris on my side. I wouldn't have been able to do what I did without him. So,
excellent. So just building on that, what advice would you two give to young women aspiring to become leaders, whether in the private, public, or nonprofit sector, or even in some community organization?
Maybe I'll start with that. I would say, be brave, be curious, and also don't be afraid to be selfish. I think take on opportunities, even if you're not 100% sure you're 100% there. Give it a try and surround yourself with people who can be successful. The other thing I would say, looking back, one thing I wish I had done was really figure out what I needed to be successful. And I'll just give us sort of simple little example. When I was going through becoming the CEO, having conversations with my executive coach about how I can be successful and what do I need in my life to be successful, a lot of the suggestions were, well, you need to get someone who's going to cook for you. You need to get someone who's going to clean for you because you're spending a lot of time at work. And so therefore, if you don't have to do those things at home, then that takes the stress off the family, stress off of you. And so I hired a cleaning staff for myself. And to be honest, my kids will tell you to this day, they knew it was cleaning day because I cleaned all night. And so really what I needed to be successful was a driver. I live in the country. I work in a city. It's an hour drive to work. I needed someone to pick up my kids after school and bring them to activities so I could meet them there and actually be focused on them instead of spending an hour driving. But when I said, I think I need a driver, everyone, my family, friends, colleagues were like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I wish I had just done it because I think the amount of time I spent in the car, frustrated driving places, I could have been spending extra time finishing the work and then really focusing on the activities I was getting to with my kids. So my suggestion is if you need a cleaning staff, get a cleaning staff. But if you don't worry about it. Get what you need. So.
Yeah, and sometimes what you need isn't what's in the textbooks or in what you learn in the seminar or whatever.
Exactly.
Such a good point, Rachel. So my advice to young women, truly, this is my advice to all people, not just young women, but you are the CEO of your career. And as the CEO of your career, you should have a vision and a mission and your values. You should have a strategic plan and know where you're going. You're also the CFO of your career. So, you probably need a spreadsheet in there as well. But I think it's really important in order to maintain that focus that Rachel talked about earlier, that we understand what we bring to the table, what we need to be successful, what we need to be happy. And I think that you should spend time articulating your personal mission and your personal vision. And I think that it can be done in 6 words or less. So I believe every one of us should have a 6-word story. And are you familiar with the 6-word story concept, right? Mm-hmm. So for those that might not be, I'm going to just share it. So apparently one night, Ernest Hemingway was in a bar with his friends, and he was asked, what's the shortest story you've ever written? And he said, I can tell a compelling story in 6 words. And they're like, let's have it. And he said, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Compelling story in 6 words. So I think that it's important for all of us as CEO of our career to condense who we are into those 6 words, and that becomes your North Star and your guiding light. So my 6-word story, which is printed on the back of my business card, my 6-word story has lots of exclamation points in it, and it is have fun, celebrate, make a difference. If I'm doing those things, then I know I'm in the right place. If I'm having fun, if I'm creating reasons to celebrate, and if I'm making a difference, then I'm in the right place. But if any of those elements are missing, then I need to reevaluate if this is the right thing for me, the right place for me, the right group of people for me, the right activity for me. It becomes like an organization's vision and mission statement, it becomes my guiding star. So that's what I would recommend to up-and-coming leaders.
That's awesome. I have to think about that. I don't have 6 words yet, so I'm going to have to think about that. Building on that, one thing that I read a book by Patrick Lencioni during one of my holidays, and the book suggested doing a family strategic plan. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
So I actually was like, oh, this is really interesting. And it's funny because anyone who's familiar with his writing, he does a novel and then gives you the theory. And in the novel, it was like a lot of what I experienced, people saying, well, why would you do that? That's so hard. What's the point of that? And really trying to simplify and explain to people what your family strategic plan is actually helps you know that it's the right plan. And I've actually done that every year, and my kids, again, roll their eyes every time I mention it's time for our family strategic plan. But it really helps you focus where you're working, what your goals are for the family for the year. And anyone who sits down and thinks about this will realize that the people within your family who are the focus change depending on what the situation is and what you're individually going through. So it also helps you articulate why you might be spending more time with one family member than another family member, or why this family member's needs come first because they're having some challenges and struggles over here. And it really helps the family all move together in the same direction. So you may have to think of something other than a strategic plan to call it so you don't get the eye rolls, but really sitting down and figuring out just for your life, but for your family as well, where you're headed and the direction you want to go in has really helped me in the last few years, especially, again, coming back to this dynamic environment that we're living in. So
I love that. That's so awesome, Rachel.
Well, this has been a wonderful discussion, Ruth and Rachel, but we're going to have to wrap up now because I've got to go home and work on my 6-word story. I've got 3 words already.
Okay, good.
But thanks so much for being here. This has been part 1, and I hope you'll both come back so we can do part 2 and get into questions about board leadership and participation on boards and how CEOs work with boards, and who knows what else will come up. So thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to exploring other topics with you in the near future. So thanks both for being here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun.
And listeners, please be sure to listen to part 2 of this conversation with Ruth McHugh and Rachel Miller. The Uncommon Sense podcast is presented by the CPA Education Foundation and funded by the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center. The Knowledge Center was created through a generous donation to the CPA Education Foundation by the late Brian Heshe. Brian was a distinguished Albertan, business leader, CPA, educator, and community builder. His generosity and commitment to education underpinned his good works across Alberta throughout his lifetime. We would like to acknowledge that the CPA Education Foundation offices are situated on the traditional Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territories and Métis Nation homeland. The Foundation acknowledges that we reside on traditional and ancestral territories of many Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Their histories and culture influence our community to this day. The CPA Education Foundation is committed to helping build a province where Indigenous people and their voices and experiences are heard, valued, respected, and celebrated. Technical and recording services for this podcast provided by Wolf Willow Studios in Edmonton. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us. If you have any comments on the podcast, write to us at cpaef@cpaalberta.ca. To learn more about the CPA Education Foundation and the Heshe CPA Knowledge Center, visit cpaalberta.ca/foundation. Thanks for listening.